We expect a few more people who are downing their last ounce of coffee to join us, but let's, to stay more or less on schedule, we have another round of panels after this one. Let's start now, and we'll try to finish roughly according to plan. So we have a distinguished panel here as well, people deeply embedded in these questions of both leaders of diasporas and of the former Minister of Diaspora Affairs, who today is, as a rabbi in Norway, also deals with the diaspora and sees it from, in effect, both sides. So I think we'll have a very productive discussion. I think that I'll speak as an American and say that the relationship between Israel and its diaspora, which is observed by me as casually as a non-Jewish but pro-Israeli and active person in the dialogue between the two communities, is remarkable. And I think we will hear some of the architecture of this, and we actually, as I understand it, have an architect of the relationship with the diaspora and Rabbi Michael Melichior. Our second speaker will be Deніел Marіашin, who represents a very large and powerful association, is responsible for its international outreach, and has the perspective of organized Jewish life and how it cooperates with and is nurtured by and nurtures in Israel in a mutually beneficial way. And then we'll have two perspectives, one not so much from the diaspora, but in a sense a Ukrainian Jew who is also a member of the, I would say, the diaspora of the state of Israel, even though he is a resident of Ukraine, and Yosif Zісельс, and who participates in international Jewish life, takes part in various dialogues and institutions, and is a frequent visitor to Israel and understands the dynamics and the relationships and how they have evolved over the years. And finally, we have Paul Grodd, who is both the, apart from being a successful businessman, which is what he really is, he is an extremely devoted volunteer to Ukrainian causes at the, I would even say, at the cost of the expansion of his own business empire, and he devotes a huge amount of time and personal resources to being an advocate for Ukraine, both in Ottawa and throughout Canada, and in his relationship as the head of the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress and the deputy head of the vice chairman of the Ukrainian World Congress. So really very differing perspectives, and I think this is, in a sense, one of the more interesting panels, because Ukraine is having, people sort of say there's a big flood of people going and seeking jobs in Poland and seeking jobs in Portugal and in Italy, and Ukraine is, but in those ways, in some sense, it's not just Zarobichan, it's not just people who are going work immigrants. They become, over time, if they settle in these societies, diasporas. So Ukraine is undergoing a growth in its diasporas, sometimes to the detriment. But Israel also has had in-growth and outgrowth and migration and immigration. So all these kinds of things, nurturing a relationship with the diaspora is all the more important if you are losing some part of your population, and maybe we'll hear the whole history of how Israel brought its diaspora home and also nurtures its diaspora abroad and the dynamic of it. So thank you all for coming, and I'm so grateful that Rabbi Melchior, who has been inside this and has thought through and devised many of the ideas that animate the relationship with Israel and its diaspora. I'm so glad that he is with us. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and to my colleagues on the panel, and to those who found this place down here in the corner and actually come and listen to us. And this is indeed a very exciting issue. The relationship between Israel and its diaspora, Israel and the world Jewry. It's an issue which actually started long before modern Israel. There was already during the Second Jewish Commonwealth, while the Second Temple was, and later on, after we lost the Temple and our independence, there was a big Jewish community in Israel, what later became called Israel, and around in the Roman Empire, and also beyond the Roman Empire in Babylon. There were two major Jewish centers, the Jewish center of Jerusalem and later on of Yavne, which was the big study center where the Talmud was developed, the oral law which became written, which was the basis of Jewish thinking until our days, and Babylon, where the Talmud was the Babylonian Talmud, which was developed during those days. So we had two centers already from that time on. And you can say in many ways that model is developing also today. We can really virtually say that we have about half of the Jews today in the world live in the States of Israel, which is, as Dan Merido said in his introduction, very different from what was when Israel was born, where we had 600,000 Jews in Israel, and today close to 7 million, and which is virtually half the Jews in the world, and we have a vast majority of say, Jewish babies born in the world. The vast majority of them are born in the States of Israel. And that's already been true for the last 25 years. So the demographic has changed of the Jewish world. But we have an important diaspora, a very, very important diaspora, and that's going to be for foreseeable future. And the question is, what kind of relationship do we develop with our diaspora? And for many years, the Israeli Zionist leadership saw the diaspora mainly through the lens of three major issues. One, as a source, and that was maybe the most important, as a source and a potential for coming to live in Israel. That was maybe the most important. You would never have an Israeli leader to speak to a community in, if it was in Ukraine or in Moscow or in Norway or in New York or anywhere where he wouldn't open and end with the message, we want to see you all move to Israel. That's it. And he meant it. It wasn't just something they said. It wasn't very efficient. That wasn't any reason why anybody would move to Israel. But that was the first message, to see it as a potential for aliyah, as we say, going up, moving up to Israel. That was the first message. The second was a source of support for Israel, political support for Israel, which had tremendous importance, of course, from the outset of the Zionist movement. and that the Jews outside from Israel, outside of Israel, were a source of political support for Israel. And the third was a source of economic support, both for the state of Israel as such, as a very poor country once upon a time, very poor country, and also for, not only for the state of Israel, but for institutions, for immigration to Israel, for social institutions, for children with special needs, for an endless, we have 30,000 non-profit organizations in Israel who all look towards mainly the Jewish world for support, and many are supported. So these were the main. This was the way we looked at our relationship with the Jewish world. Now, what has to be said is, it was mentioned somewhat in the introduction, was that the demography has changed. Now, if we look back, as I said, it was somewhat mentioned, the beginning of Zionism, the end of the 19th century. At that time, there were more than 90% of world Jewry were living in the extended Eastern Europe. More than 90%. Dan Meridor got his figures slightly wrong. There was about 5-6% in the Arab countries, and the rest were in Western Europe and in America. So you had more than 90%. And that was the situation when 120 years ago. Then there was a shift of that. Most went then to America. Most went to America, and of those who left Eastern Europe, and very few came to Palestine. But those who left and those who came to Palestine, they were brothers and sisters. This was a first generation connection. And it was nearly by coincidence. There were very few who came to Israel. The first Aliyot, you had 2 million who went to America and 50,000 who came to Israel. But those who came to Israel, they were brothers and sisters of those who went to America. So it was obvious that we had the same fate. We ran away from the prosecutions and the anti-Semitism of Jews, going to bed at night, not knowing what they would wait up to the next morning. And it was obvious that we had a common destiny, a common fate. And it was obvious that there would be support to Israel from the Jews. But in the meantime, we're now 3 generations later. And the question is, and Israel is already a strong country, Israel is a wealthy country, and the question is, are we still family? Is there still a feeling that we have a common fate, a common destiny, common values with Jews who live around the world? That's a big question. There was a big poll, there's a conference in Israel these days of the American Jewish Committee, there's a big poll, a big hoo-ha about this poll, if we're mishpacha. Are we mishpacha? Are we family together? Do the Israelis feel that they're family with world Jewry? Do world Jewry feel that they're family with Israel? And truth is that only about 20% or so, or 20, 25%, I don't remember exactly the percentages, I also don't believe in most of these polls, but it doesn't matter. There is a feeling that we're maybe not as close family, at least, as what we were. So what do we do about it? We have to be totally otherwise proactive to change this trend. And when I became the first minister for world Jewry, I don't like exactly the word diaspora, for world Jewry and social affairs in Israel. And I on purpose took that task, which I had held, by the way, in several governments in Israel. When I took upon that task, I said we're going to change the relationship. It can't be a one-way relationship for us to receive only. We have to give back. We have to do something for world Jewry. It has to be give and take for us to establish a different kind of relationship. And one of the first things I did as a cabinet minister was, together with some American philanthropists and others around the world, we created a program called Birthright Israel, which has become very famous. It's also working here in Ukraine and many places. What's the idea? The idea is that every young Jew in the world has a right to come for a free trip to Israel in the age between 18 and 25, to come for a free trip and live Israel and experience Israel. What we found out was, up till then, very interestingly, the world Jewry had never come even to visit Israel. Only about 10% had once in their lives, not only of the young Jews, also of the older Jews, only about 10% had once in their lives come to visit Israel. We wanted to change that. And not only to come to visit, but to re-establish a connection not only to the state of Israel, but also to their Jewish identity through that kind of experience. And it worked. Today we have more than 50% of every age group. We have now, through this program, re-establishing their connection to their Jewishness and their Jewish identity. Most of them not affiliated to any kind of Judaism, most of them, through this experience in Israel. And many, many other programs have followed after that, where we say, and there was a lot of opposition in Israel and the Jewish communities outside when we started the program. Many were against it. The Jewish Agency was against it. Everybody was against it when we started. And today it's a tremendous success, because we're starting to turn the trend with the kind of connection. Unfortunately, there are others who are doing certain actions, including my government in Israel, to push young Jews away also from their connection to Israel. But that's another story. But there is today, and all future ministers of diaspora, including the present, have understood that we need the diaspora. We need not only to receive support and financial support and aliyah, immigration, but we need to support a diaspora. For it we need to invest. We need to invest funds. And I can tell you, and I will finish off with this, otherwise I will get probably a knock in the head soon. I'll finish off with this. I can tell you that I've been talking in different places in the world about this experience, and all kinds of ideas which we've evolved around this. Different places. I talked in Argentina about this. The Arab community in Argentina, which is a very big Arab community, they said, we want to create a birthright for Arabs to come and connect to Arab countries where they come from, to have this kind of experience. I've spoken in Australia about this. Australia has a tremendous diaspora all over the world. They want Australians to have a kind of birthright to come to Australia. This, and it doesn't have to be the exact model of birthright, but I'm just saying the idea that you have an immense connection. You mentioned I was in Norway. I'm entitled in Norway. I go once in a while. The chief rabbi of Norway. My son is the rabbi there. He does a much better job than I. I'm in Jerusalem, and that's fine. That's plenty to be a rabbi in Jerusalem. It's plenty on my hand. Norway has a big community of Norwegians in America, you might know, in Minnesota, all over the place. And this connection is important financially, in substance of identity. And I'm sure that these ideas are ideas which also Ukraine, with its immense diaspora, also can benefit a lot from. Thank you for listening.
Rabbi, thank you for that very comprehensive presentation. I have one other question which you didn't address, if you could just...
I have a million things I didn't address.
No, I know, but the question of citizenship, how important is the citizenship issue, and how does Israel handle citizenship for its diaspora?
Well, the rule is that any Jew, which means anybody who is born from a Jewish mother or has converted to Judaism in any kind of framework, has in Israel, when you come to live in Israel, has automatic citizenship in Israel. That's called the law of return, and you have automatic, when you come to live in Israel, you get automatic citizenship. The day you come to Israel, you will get citizenship in the state of Israel. This is a part of the basic of us being the state of the Jewish people, that you will always be able to obtain citizenship. However, Jews who live outside Israel, if they live in Ukraine or in America or Norway or whatever, they do not have citizenship. They can be involved in what goes on in Israel, they can have their opinions about it, they can support it, they can oppose what goes on. They have a right to say their opinions, of course. If they say it respectfully, we will even listen to what they have to say. But they do not have citizenship, they can't vote in Israel. We have also, and which one of the many things I didn't talk about, there are many Israelis also who have left Israel. Many of the immigrants who came to Israel, including those who came from the former Soviet Union, from Russia and Ukraine and others, have left Israel, gone other places, but also others, let's say those who immigrated from America, well, not that many, but those who have left again. Nearly 50% of them have left again. And they have Israeli citizenship, and they keep their, those who already have their Israeli citizenship, they keep their Israeli citizenship. But you have automatic Israeli citizenship if you are Jewish and you come under the law of return, you come to live in the States of Israel.
Thank you very much. Dan Mariashin, from the, I know you have a prepared set.
I do. It's semi-prepared.
All right. So just a kind of one question that I hope you will address is sort of as a consumer. In other words, how does the relationship with Israel help the Jewish community in the United States and elsewhere maintain its coherence, its identity, and so on? I assume you're addressing that.
Yeah. Is this working? I guess it is.
Okay. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you to Beryl and to Adrian for the invitation to take part in this very timely conversation. It's a privilege to join this distinguished panel in this room and in the other meetings and panels that we're going to have. I'm gratified to be here at an important moment for both Ukraine and Israel, each with its own substantial and complex challenges. But before I continue, every speaker who's come from outside Ukraine has established their bona fides with Ukraine. So I reached, and I told this to Adrian and to Beryl last night, that my father was born in Belarus. And he came to the United States in 1913. You can imagine, 1913. My mother was from Lithuania. She came about the same time to the United States. And he always told me, I remember as a little kid, he always told me that he had an uncle who lived in Poltava. I had no idea where Poltava was, but I knew that he had an uncle in Poltava. How he got there from Belarus, what he was doing there, we still don't know. It's possible that he was killed during the Holocaust. It's possible that he survived. The family, we don't know. But I thought I would throw that in. because of the other comments that some have made. The other thing is that my name, this is one of the few places in the world actually where my name is pronounced correctly. Many places people just give up and they'll call me Mr. Daniel. But I checked in yesterday and they said, Mr. Mariashin, welcome. And I thought, well, this is great. So I guess they detected that the name came from this part of Europe. And with regard to the Ukrainian diaspora, I was in New York a few months ago during Passover, and my nephew works at a Jewish organization at NYU, and I stayed in a hotel near New York University. And in the afternoon, wandered about the neighborhoods in lower Manhattan, and lo and behold, around the corner from the hotel where I was staying was this magnificent Ukrainian cathedral, the Ukrainian Museum, and a little bit further up, the Veselka restaurant. So that was my most recent connection to the Ukrainian community. I would just say two things in response, and then I'll move to my remarks. Two things in response to Michael's presentation. One is that you're absolutely right about this birthright program now spawning new programs for other ethnic groups. We've worked very closely, for example, with the Greek American community, which is a community about a third of the size of ours. There's about 2 million Greek Americans. And they also already have their own program. They don't call it Birthright, but this is a similar program where they take high school students and younger college students to Greece and to Cyprus during the summer. And one other thing, Michael, I think you were there in Lithuania for the return of the Torahs.
I made the agreement.
Well, there was a negotiation. There was a negotiation to return hundreds of Torah scrolls. I was part of that negotiation with the Lithuanian government. There were American Jewish organizations that were involved. The State of Israel was involved in returning. These Torah scrolls had been hidden first from the Nazis and then hidden from the Soviets. They materialized in some of them in the State Library of Lithuania. It was a long back and forth negotiation, but finally the Torahs were returned, and they were returned to Israel, and Michael played a very, very important role in that. But our topic today is Israel's relations with its diaspora, and this relationship is, as you've heard, central for Israel for an extent, we think, to an extent, unique among states. This fact has implications that touch upon numerous facts, including security, identity, religion, culture, political engagement, economics, and more, in the life of Israel as well as in the life of its diaspora communities. And there are dozens of American Jewish organizations that place Israel and advocating for Israel high up on their agendas, mine among them. Advocating for a safe and secure Israel. Their activities vary, but their objectives remain largely the same. They work as secular organizations, religious organizations, youth groups, and others. They even organize under an umbrella. There's a conference of presidents of major American Jewish organizations. And they came together back in the mid-1950s for the express purpose of not being all over, as we say, we have an expression, all over the map, but to reach some, even though they differ ideologically, there should be some kind of consensus in the American Jewish community in support of the State of Israel. That is the Conference of Presidents, more than 50 such organizations. Now, why do we care so passionately about Israel and its future? And why do we organize to assure, or to help assure, that future? And well, we're motivated by our love for Israel. Israel was created, among many other reasons, precisely so that Jews living in exile would have a safe harbor, one place to return to and be assured of safety, to live and to live freely as Jews, in one majority Jewish society shaped by Jews' heritage and rooted in Jews' unique history. The leaders of modern Zionism, motivated by an acute awareness of anti-Semitism's persistence in the diaspora, the more things change, the more they stay the same, and energized by the prospect of Jewish national rebirth and renaissance in Israel, hoped that many Jews living in exile would seize the once in 2 millennia opportunity to come home, to begin reversing their dispersion as a vulnerable and persecuted minority, and to assert their right to self-determination and self-defense as a people equal to and living in coexistence with all others. And so, Jews' right of return was instituted immediately upon the founding of the Jewish state in 1948 and made clear and sacrosanct in Israel's Declaration of Independence. Israel was to be a diverse and genuine democracy with full civil rights for all of its citizens, including a significant population of Christians and Muslims. But the special and vital role of Israel as a singular refuge and national center for Jews globally was to be guarded very carefully. Aliyah, which you've heard about, Aliyah, or Jewish ascent to Israel, has long been a foremost pillar of the Zionist program. The prioritization of Aliyah contributed to the tenfold increase in Israel's population over 7 decades, and to the flourishing of Israel as a powerhouse of faith, of innovation, of debate, of culture, of scholarship, and more. That said, Aliyah was often most fueled by situations of hardship, whether violent anti-Semitism in Arab lands, religious repression in the Soviet Union, or most recently, the new anti-Semitism imported by some Northern African and other immigrants to Western European countries, with more secure and comfortable diaspora Jewish communities, as well as more assimilated ones, like in the United States, yielding far fewer Jewish returnees to Israel. As many of the more endangered or underprivileged diaspora Jews have already relocated to Israel or elsewhere, and the Zionist ideology, perhaps inevitably, just lost just a bit of its early romantic hold, Israel, even as it has achieved substantial success in many areas, has also seen, and Rabbi Melchior just mentioned it, kind of a reverse movement, with opportunities beckoning Israelis abroad, a legendary desire to explore, and a taboo on immigration weakened. Some Israelis have gone to live and work in other countries. And so, although still relatively small in number, apart from the larger traditional Jewish diaspora around the world, now exists a distinctive Israeli diaspora. Jews originally from Israel itself, with its now hybrid culture of Ashkenazi and Mizrahi and other elements. Many members of this expat community naturally serve as citizen ambassadors of Israel and Israeli society, whether short or long term, in far-flung places from India to the US to Brazil and Germany. And in fact, in the last several years, a new organization of Israeli Americans has been established alongside all of the other 50-plus organizations that I mentioned. And among their main objectives is to advocate for the state of Israel. So here you have kind of a reverse situation, a period where Israelis came to the United States, they became settled, they became more confident in themselves, and now they have an organization that advocates on behalf of Israel. Meanwhile, this dynamic and the roles in the overall diaspora-Israel relationship have also evolved. Now, where the founding raison d'etre of Israel included the ability of an Israel Defense Forces to help prevent the likes of the Holocaust from ever happening again, today the government of Israel has committed itself not merely to the physical survival of Jews internationally, but also to the preservation of their identity through education and community. Israel, for years, was a recipient of aid from abroad, from diaspora Jewish communities. Now, Israel gives back in many ways. And it's a two-way relationship, and it's very interesting to watch this two-way relationship develop. For example, you can find many Israeli teachers who teach in Jewish schools abroad, all over the world. It has really been a Peace Corps, as we have in the United States, for Jewish teachers, many of them coming out of Israel. Rabbis from Israel fill pulpits all over the world. There's an organization called Israel. My organization was a founding member organization. It's an organization that works together with diaspora communities such as ours to provide assistance largely to non-Jews, to the victims of natural disasters, hurricanes, tsunamis, and earthquakes. So now it's working in the other direction. In turn, diaspora Jewish communities and organizations have played a continuous and critical part, especially in the U.S., which remains both the foremost global superpower and the major Jewish populations outside Israel, in standing up for the rights and needs of Israel as the country has been forced to fight violent annihilationists since the time of its establishment. Now, I'll just give you a couple of examples of my own organization, and then I'll conclude because I look forward to the other presentations. My organization, Bnei-Brith, was founded by German Jewish immigrants to the United States. It founded in New York as a fraternal and humanitarian service organization 175 years ago. Now, 175 years, small drop in terms of the continuum of Jewish history, but it's a long continuum in terms of American history. It was a full century before Jewish sovereignty was renewed in Israel, and thus maintaining an agenda that far exceeds what might be seen the parochial. Bnei-Brith has over the last 70 years and in dozens of countries where we maintain a grassroots or professional presence, heavily emphasized the well-being of Israel in our programming and our advocacy. And so Bnei-Brith, which maintains an office in Jerusalem, has since 1888 our first branch in Jerusalem. Here's an organization founded in the United States that organized a branch in Jerusalem going back to the 1880s. Has helped establish and sustain varied social institutions and infrastructure in Israel, from libraries to bomb shelters to programs for Jewish refugees and immigrants. We organize missions to Israel from around the world, not only by Jews, young and old, but also by foreign government officials, clergy, artists, academics, and others. Implements innumerable public events relevant to Israel, both here and in the diaspora. Annually bestows prestigious awards for excellence in Israeli news reporting on diaspora Jewish affairs. Spearheads recognition of long unknown Jewish rescuers of fellow Jews during the Holocaust, and helped create and operate a major coalition of Israeli NGOs engaged in extending disaster relief around the globe, which is Israel, which I mentioned. And around the world, our staff advocates continuously for Israel, for its alliances, for its good name, for support of its fight against terrorism and hostile regimes, for its fair treatment in multilateral institutions, for its entitlement to exist in peace as a democratic state. In national capitals, we do this at the United Nations, Organization of American States, the OSCE here in Europe and elsewhere. And I would just mention one other connection before I close. Indeed, it was because Israel has just celebrated on May 14th its 70th anniversary, and this is the 70th anniversary year, and we are celebrating also with this meeting. It was a Bnei-Brith member from Kansas City, Missouri, whose name was Eddie Jacobson, who, at our organization's urging, managed to persuade his friend and former business partner, President Harry Truman, to accept a meeting with would-be Israel's founding president, Chaim Weizmann. Weizmann had a hard time getting in to see President Truman before the United States recognized the state of Israel. There were difficulties with the State Department, there were difficulties with the Defense Department, there were a lot of people who were against the United States recognizing the state of Israel. And we knew that this Eddie Jacobson, who lived in Missouri, was a good friend, a very close friend of President Truman, and a member of our organization could perhaps help. And we convinced, one thing led to another. Truman met with Weizmann, and as they say, the rest is history. Now, this relationship is an evolving one, but it's a relationship that I've said that it's unique, and we're here really to talk about what lessons there might be, and I would say in both directions. What lessons there might be. I'm not, and we're going to hear from Paul soon, I'm not completely aware or very much aware of the activity of Ukrainian-American organizations in, we call it pro-Israel advocacy, you would call it pro-Ukraine advocacy, and I look forward to learning more about it. Some of what I've said is unique, it's unique to our history. You have your own unique history. And so some of these relationships clearly will be different. I can't say that we wrote the book, but certainly we have perfected it. When you're in exile for 2,000 years, you kind of become an expert at being in exile. And so for the last 70 years, we've tried to adjust to the fact that we now really have a center for all of our hopes and dreams and our religious being. So we are, I would say, still very much a work in progress, but a work, nevertheless, that we as diaspora Jews, as American Jews and diaspora Jews, as we take on this responsibility, do it with a great deal of passion, I think, and we do it quite willingly because of the importance of the State of Israel to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Brod, you've heard a lot of ideas and approaches, some of them a little similar, some of them a little different. Your observations on where Ukraine stands on its relationship. Of course, we know that Ukraine is not yet, as an economy, generate the kind of wealth that it can make very large investments in its diaspora, but what is it doing, what are you urging it to do, and the like?
Maybe you need some public relations for Canada these days.
We'll leave that aside for a second. And I'd like to be brief because there's lots of good discussion I'm looking forward to. But let me first of all thank in particular the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter, its founder Jim Temete, in particular Adrian and Beryl for organizing this session. When Adrian was first musing about this session, I strongly encouraged them to pursue it and said I am all in. I think this is a very fascinating discussion, and I've come here to learn. And I also want to thank the New Europe Center for co-organizing. But also want to thank our Jewish friends for coming here and sharing their insights with us. It's greatly appreciated, and I think that the relationship between the Ukrainian and Jewish diaspora has evolved for the better over the last several years. And I also want to attribute that largely to the work of the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter. They've done amazing work to bring our two communities closer together, break down some of those barriers, and address where some of the perhaps disinformation has been happening over the years. First off, I'd like to just mention that there are many, listening to what I have heard so far, there are many similarities, but there are also many differences, which I'd like to just briefly touch on. But I think it's first important to understand the Ukrainian diaspora is sort of categorized into 4 waves of immigration. The first wave left Ukraine in the late 1800s, then shortly before the First World War. The third wave came after the Second World War, and the fourth wave came after Ukraine's independence. And all are very, very unique and different. We're fortunate in Canada that we're actually able to bring all 4 waves of immigration together and identify what our challenges and what our differences are, but find a commonality. And Ukraine has been that commonality. The Ukrainian culture has been that commonality. When you look at those that are 4th generation, 5th generation Ukrainian Canadians, and we're a bit unique because we actually call ourselves in Canada Ukrainian Canadians, which is different from many other diasporas because the Ukrainian Canadian community looks at themselves as one of the founding peoples of Canada, really settled Western Canada. And as a result, you'll see some small towns, small cities in Western Canada that the population is more than 50% Ukrainian. Where you'll still have a sign on the side of the hospital that's in Ukrainian and English. It's becoming more and more of a rarity, but it's still an interesting observation about the history. And it's important to understand, the Ukrainian immigration is as a result of them fleeing Ukraine. Or in the case of my parents, who were forced out of Ukraine, could not return to Ukraine after the Second World War. We left because there was a problem in Ukraine. But it's also important to kind of understand the various perceptions we've had about Ukraine over I would call it the last, let's say, 30 years. So prior to Ukraine's independence, the raison d'etre, the reason for being for our Ukrainian Canadian community or for Ukrainian diaspora period was freedom for Ukraine. Ukraine became independent and everybody celebrated, relaxed, and now we can go and live our lives and wish Ukraine the best and go visit once in a while. But then we realized after the Orange Revolution that democracy is really at risk here in Ukraine. And we need to become more and more involved in helping to secure Ukraine's democracy. So after the Orange Revolution, we felt, hey, we won back Ukraine's democracy, and now we can relax again. And then we had the Revolution of Dignity. And at that point, I think today the attitude of the Ukrainian diaspora is much different. And I think we've grown up and recognized that we can't, as they say in Ukrainian, we cannot lay down our rest because Ukraine is under threat, not just from its own internal challenges, but by a foreign aggressor. And I think that has, as it has unified the Ukrainians in Ukraine, it has unified the Ukrainian diaspora. We've also had a developing relationship with the government of Ukraine. Obviously, pre-independence days, there was no relationship. And in fact, the government of Ukraine, or in that case, the government of the Soviet Union, worked actively to undermine the Ukrainian diaspora. We were called extremists, we were called fascists, you name it. The propaganda machine was turned on full-fledged against Ukrainian diaspora organizations. After independence, they tried to get to know us, wondering who these people are. And a lot of them looked at the Ukrainian diaspora as those who fled. They left the homeland for a better life, left us here to suffer, and as a result, we would like their money, but we don't really need them here. And I think it's really now evolved to what I'll call sort of the third stage, is that after the revolution of dignity, the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian government authorities that are currently in power saw the real value and strength of the Ukrainian diaspora in helping to gather international support for Ukraine during the Maidan, the Revolution of Dignity, and during the Russian invasion and ongoing war. And so as a result, what was, I think, really telling, recently Prime Minister Groysman, when he visited Canada, we were having a conversation, and as a result of that, he's come to realize that it's not 45 million people or 50 million people living in Ukraine and 20 million in the diaspora. He now looks at this, and I think more Ukrainians are starting to recognize that we're 70 million Ukrainian people. And we're not there yet. They're the beginnings of a paradigm shift. But that's where I see us going. Now, one of the challenges that I have as the President of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress and the Vice President of the Ukrainian World Congress is, let's take a stock of where our diaspora is today. In some countries like Canada and the United States, Australia, Great Britain, they are quite influential, where there is an older diaspora. I think in countries like Western Europe, where the older diaspora has died down, not been active, and there's a new flux of immigration, a lot of them are illegals, and a lot of them are there to send money back to Ukraine. And so as a result, they're not focused on how do we become part of that society and how do we make sure that we're influential in our society. And also we have the biggest challenge right now, I think, is rapid assimilation of, in particular, new Ukrainian immigrants. And there's that sense of we're fleeing a difficult economic, political situation, a country that's at war. We just want to live at peace. And it's just easier to just assimilate with the community that they live and go about their lives very peacefully, getting away from that sort of post-Soviet system. So one of the challenges, and one of the things I'd like to sort of share with everyone here is there's a model that I think has worked in particular in Canada, and that is of maintaining identity of the Ukrainian diaspora. And that is a concept I call cradle to grave. Whereas and I'm probably, and my children are probably good examples of that. You're born into a Ukrainian family, you go to, you're baptized in a Ukrainian church, you go to Ukrainian preschool, to Ukrainian school, Ukrainian youth organization, Ukrainian students organizations, a plethora of different cultural organizations, dance, song, you name it, right through to professional organizations, and then seniors organizations, seniors residences, and Ukrainian cemeteries. And that's the cradle to grave concept that I consider I've recognized for the Ukrainian diaspora is a model for success. Now, I think it's also very similar to the Jewish model. But I'd like to learn more about how, and one of the questions I'd like to leave my fellow panelists with is, how do you preserve identity? What motivates world Jewry to maintain their passion for being Jewish? And there's different tools that you brought to bear. The Birthright program is one of those. But I'd like to know, because that's a concept that we're still evolving. I mean, again, prior to Ukraine's independence, we all had to be Ukrainian because Ukrainian culture and language is being oppressed by the Soviet Union. Today, there's an independent country, and why we still need to continue to be Ukrainian. So that's kind of an overarching message that I'd like to get your perspectives on. I've got some of my ideas, but I'd like to hear some of yours. Just want to perhaps end on this perhaps note. The challenges between Ukraine and its diaspora. Today, I think that the relationship is better than it ever has been in the history of relations. I think that there's a very cooperative relationship where, whether it's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, right through to the Ministry of Youth and Sport, Defense, Culture, the President, the Prime Minister, the relationship is very, very strong between the organized Ukrainian diaspora and the government of Ukraine today. However, there are some challenges. You mentioned, Michael, about was it the Prime Minister of Israel calling on the diaspora to return back to Israel, or to come to Israel, not to come back to, but to come to Israel, and making that call, and sort of pulling out all the stops. Frankly speaking, we're not getting that strong message from the Ukrainian authorities. Mind you, look, they've got a few challenges on their hand, like fighting a war with Vladimir Putin, but that being said, there isn't that open attitude of, come back to Ukraine, or come to Ukraine and we're going to open everything up for you. I mean, citizenship laws, huge challenge. I mean, we've had some diasporites take public office at extreme duress, very challenging, and again, that sentiment isn't quite there yet in Ukraine. It's changing, but it still has a long way to go. So perhaps on that note, I'll end and look forward to a further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Pane Yosef, I don't mean to get you, it'll be easier to speak to you directly. So, Pane Yosef, ви берете участь і розумієте і українську діаспору, і єврейську діаспору, і Ізраїлю, і Україну. Ви маєте унікальний статус на цьому панелі, бо ви відчуваєте всі ці виміри вашої ідентичності і вашої щоденної діяльності. Ваші коменти про дві моделі стосунків з діаспорою будуть вельми корисними для розжвавлення цієї дискусії. Ласкаво.
Доброго дня усім, дякую організаторам за запрошення виступити на цій конференції. Кажуть, що є таке правило, що останнім дуже невигідно виступати, бо вже все сказано. Я дуже вдячний тим, хто виступав переді мною, Рабину Мельхіору, бо він мене позбавив потреби розповідати всю єврейську історію за 3000 років. Але все ж таки, я думаю, що правила не буває без виключення, бо коли йдеться, і тут пан Адріан правий, коли йдеться про українців і про євреїв, про Україну і Ізраїль, я думаю, що я знайду, що додати до того, що вже було сказано. Порівнювати треба завжди, хоча це не дуже непроста справа. Порівнювати Україну і Ізраїль, порівнювати українську діаспору і єврейську діаспору. І ми завжди зможемо, порівнюючи, знайти якісь риси, які притаманні тій і іншій системі, але завжди буде але. Кома і потім але. Бо я вважаю, що при всій схожості вона досить поверхова, ця схожість. Але насправді це дуже різні країни і дуже різні діаспори. Тим не менш, вивчати досвід треба. Але коли ми кажемо, от так як зазначено у назві цієї конференції, що передача досвіду державотворення Ізраїлю Україні, у мене тут є певний скептицизм. Бо переносити досвід можна, але дуже обережно. Його треба, по-перше, адаптувати. А по-друге, взагалі дослідити, чи взагалі можна цей досвід, який утворювався в зовсім іншій географії, в інших умовах, в іншій ідентичності, а це найважливіше, переносити в інше місце, де цей досвід, можливо, і не приживеться. І ми знаємо, що може бути і відторгнено, і досвід також. Я хотів би зосередитися саме спочатку на питанні ідентичності, бо дуже важливо розуміти, я дякую пану Павлу Гроду, що він згадав про це, про ідентичність, що це низка якостей, по якій цей народ відрізняється від іншого. І це притаманно цьому народу низка якостей, вона визначає його сучасне, вона пояснює його історію, і вона певним чином визначає його майбутнє. І коли ми не дуже добре розберемося в ідентичності євреїв і українців, ми не зможемо переносити цей досвід і застосовувати там, де він, можливо, і не може бути застосований. Є певні маркери, які вказують нам на те, що в глибині цієї системи ідентичності є дуже різні прояви, дуже різні чинники. Наприклад, ми бачимо, що ознака релігійності – це дуже важливий маркер. Євреї – це іудаїзм, передусім, в більшості своїй. Українці – це православ'я, в більшості, хоч є і греко-католики і інші. І цей маркер, який означає, що десь всередині ідентичності є велика різниця, його треба враховувати. Бо якщо ми його не враховуємо, це дуже погано і це витрата часу. Є інші маркери, наприклад, євреї вийшли з Близького Сходу, і це інша етнічна група. А українці – це частина славянського світу. Це також дуже значний маркер, який визначає також певні відмінності у селі. Тому, коли мені кажуть, що ось Україна через 30 років буде Польщею, а через 50 років Німеччиною, а через 70 років Сполученими Штатами, я кажу, що цього ніколи не буде. Бо маркери різні. Єдина країна, де більш-менш маркери співпадають з Україною, це Болгарія. Це славянська країна, це православна країна, це посткомуністична країна і це постколоніальна країна. Це дуже важливі чинники. Бо коли країна перебуває в колоніальній залежності різного штибу, але дуже багато часу, це також впливає на її ідентичність. І дуже серйозно впливає. І совєтська частина історії у Болгарії, наприклад, 50 років, в Україні 70 років, що західні 50, це також дуже важливий чинник, який також спотворює ідентичність, як притаманно тому чи іншому народу. Але він дає нам можливість порівнювати. У Ізраїля дуже важливий чинник, що єврейський народ, коли зміг утворити державу Ізраїль після Другої світової війни, вперше в історії євреї опинилися у більшості в своїй країні. І більшість в своїй країні дуже важливий чинник побудови своєї ідентичності нової і подальшої ідентичності. У українців все сталося в 91-му році. Бо на цій місцевості, що називалася Україною, тоді казали «на Україні», також жили більшість українців, але вони ніколи не були незалежними від різних імперських чинників, що то була Австро-Угорська імперія, чи навіть Османська імперія, чи головним чином Російська імперія. В Російській імперії українці були меншиною, великою, але все ж таки меншиною. І вперше в 91-му році вони стали більшістю в своїй країні, і це почало утворювати нову українську ідентичність. І це також треба розуміти. Це нібито схожі параметри, там нова ідентичність і тут. Я, наприклад, знаю в австралійській єврейській громаді, частині діаспори, коли бачать нових іммігрантів, за останні 30 років було 3 хвилі імміграції єврейської в Австралію. І австралійські євреї кажуть так, ось ці 2 хвилі це взагалі не євреї, а ось це щось схоже. Ось на лекції по ідентичності я навожу цей приклад, бо він дуже добре характеризує цю проблему ідентичності. Совєтські євреї, які приїхали до Австралії на початку 90-х років, вони не вважаються євреями взагалі в Австралії. Бо там зберіглася певна система західноєвропейської ідентичності взагалі і єврейської зокрема. І для них люди, які позбавлені знань про свою історію, про свою релігію, які не моляться, вони для них не євреї. Хоча вони тут, в Совєтському Союзі, були євреями, що їх об'єднувало, це антисемітизм державний. І певна симпатія до держави Ізраїль, коли вона виникла, але дуже прихована симпатія у більшості своїй. Ось от такі чудернацькі справи з ідентичністю. А друга хвиля, кого вони не вважають євреями, це ізраїльтяни. Ізраїль – це нова ідентичність, вона не схожа на єврейську ідентичність у діаспорі. Є відоме дослідження американських соціологів Рабина і Коена, пройшло в 90-ті роки, яке досліджувало ідентичність євреїв в Америці і в Ізраїлі. Вони прийшли до абсурдного висновку, що це дві різні ідентичності, два різних народи і навіть два різних системи юдаїзму. Звичайно, це не так. Вони навіть після цього дослідження, які вони були вражені самі своїм дослідженням, сказали, що немає навіть тої праідентичності, звідки виникли ці дві ідентичності, ізраїльська і єврейська. Я для цього підсилюю ці акценти, щоб зрозуміти, що не враховуючи ідентичність, неможливо передавати досвід. А кого австралійські євреї вважають своїми, схожими на них? Південноамериканських євреїв, південноафриканських євреїв. Оце євреї, які розвивалися в такій самій системі західноєвропейської ідентичності. Це литовські, голландські і англійські євреї, які попали в Південну Африку. Ось вам ідентичність. Кого вважають своїм, кого не вважають своїм. Історії утворення держав також дуже різні. Україна сталася нарешті в 91-му році, незважаючи на чисельні спроби утворення держави після розвалу Совєтського Союзу. І я був дисидентом, я був політв'язнем, і я не перебільшую наших зусиль по утворенню держави України. Розпалася імперська система, і Україна отримала можливість стати незалежною і демократичною країною. Вона це робить, але не дуже впевнена, не дуже послідовна і дуже противоречива. У Ізраїля не було такого минулого. Ізраїль не був колонією будь-кого. Територія була частиною Турецької Османської імперії, але Ізраїль як держава, як народ, він не був частиною імперії саме Османської. Євреї приїхали з різних країн, коли заснували Ізраїль. Передусім там були важливі європейські євреї, які після Голокосту приїхали в Ізраїль і нарешті отримали свою державу, що для них було дуже важливо. Це різні утворення цих держав також показують, що не можна механічно їх порівнювати і передавати цей досвід. Впливи діаспор на утворення країн, на їх розвиток дуже різні. Я навіть бачу дещо протилежне. Тобто я частина єврейської діаспори, чи ізраїльської, якщо можна так сказати, проживаючи в Україні, навіть керуючи одною з величезних організацій, Umbrella, єврейських, бачу, що наші стосунки з Ізраїлем розвиваються певним чином. Україна поліпшує, як держава, поліпшує свої стосунки з Ізраїлем. За ці 26 років вони дуже розвинулись. А єврейська громада, навпаки, трохи зменшує ці відношення. У нас є свої завдання тут, і з ізраїльським вони не завжди співпадають. Ми дуже вдячні Ізраїлю, коли він нам допоміг на початку 90-х років розбудовувати свої структури. Дійсно була допомога. Але для Ізраїля було важливо еміграція. Не тільки з України, з усіх країн. Тобто алія. Для нас було важливо зберегти і відновити громаду єврейську тут, бо вона була розтрощена совєтською владою. І ці різні завдання на початку, коли трошки співпадали, але потім почали дуже і дуже розвиватися. А коли ми говоримо про ідентичність, я б дуже був радий, якщо б Ізраїль допоміг Україні, звичайно, не економічно. Ізраїль маленька країна, незважаючи на їх могутність економічну і воєнну, вони не здатні допомогти такій економічно такій великій країні, як Україна. Але ось різні елементи ідентичності, що стосуються більше виховання, тобто розраховані на одномоментну допомогу, а на дуже довгий шлях перевиховання самих себе. Бо ми нарешті відірвалися від імперії, від Східної, від Євразійської імперії, від певної ідентичності. Ми знаходимося на перехідному етапі, і тут, можливо, дещо можна було б запозичити в Ізраїлі. Але це не одномоментні проекти і програми. Це дуже довгі. Наприклад, важливою частиною ідентичності східної це неповага до закону. На Заході, навпаки, більшість людей поважає закон. І мені ще жодний експерт ні в Ізраїлі, ні в Європі, ніде, бо я шукаю це багато років, не сказав, як зробити з євразійської ідентичності, з народу, який розвивався в Ізраїлі, як зробити людей західної європейської ідентичності. Ми всі кажемо, що ми йдемо в Європу, але що ми під цим розуміємо, ніхто не знає. Ізраїль все ж таки більше частина західного світу, хоч є дуже великі відмінності і питання до цього, але все ж таки він частина західного світу. Ми ще ні. І ось як будувати ці відношення з Заходом, як переходити, як змінювати свою ідентичність, можливо. Далі. Політичне життя, політичні партії. У нас дуже однозначна євразійська модель політичних партій. Це лідерські партії. Ніякої ідеології, ніяких базових основ, які усюди в світі лежать під політичними партіями, в Україні нема. Ізраїль все ж таки не за великий термін, 70 років, хоч це починалося ще до утворення, розбудовував свою політичну систему. Є дещо схоже. Наявність зовнішнього ворога потужного, вона трохи спотворює політичну систему. І це схоже в Ізраїлі і в Україні. В Україні Росія, в Ізраїлі арабський світ. І тому я був здивований 30 років тому, коли почав їздити в Ізраїль, що править то ті, хто за жорстку позицію до арабського світу. А ліві це ті, що за перемовини, за дружбу, за перемирення і таке інше. Те саме і у нас було тоді. Неважливо, хто ти за економічно-соціальними питаннями, головне, що ти проти Росії, що ти за Росію. Я бачу, мене вже хочуть обмежити, хоча я не говорив, що навіть 10-ту частину, тому що мої колеги. Різні демократичні перетворення. Україна відбудовує свою демократію, і я не думаю, що вона знає, в кого брати приклад. Бо ніхто не враховує ті самі проблеми ідентичності, про які я зазначив. І тут я бачу велику можливість для української діаспори. І я, знаючи Павла Грода, знаю інших дуже діячів української діаспори, бачу, що підсилюються зв'язки з Україною у української діаспори підсилюються. Бо ті, що були в 90-ті роки керманичі, колишні комуністи, їм це було не потрібно. Бо їх все життя виховували, що діаспора – це зло і це вороги. Це націоналісти, які хочуть знищити комуністичну Україну. І пройшло аж 25 більше років, поки що Україна зрозуміла, що діаспора може дуже серйозно їй допомогти. Це потребувалося ось такий шлях. Бо тепер вже нема комуністів майже, комсомольців мало, ще, правда, піонери і жовтенята залишилися, і треба їх пережити. Ну ось ми разом з діаспорою спробуємо це зробити. Що важливо в ізраїльському досвіді? Це певна, хоча є зауваження, система діаспора і Ізраїль. Вона працює, вона випробована часом, є певні взаємодії, є розділ повноважень. І якщо б Україна змогла з діаспорою, чи навпаки діаспора з Україною побудувати таку систему, було б дуже важливо, бо дійсно 45 мільйонів тут, 25 живуть за кордоном, так як і в Ізраїлі живуть там. 8 мільйонів там, а решта за кордоном. Але це працює в Ізраїлі, бо економічна допомога, фінансова допомога величезна. Я вам наведу приклад. У 50-ті роки, коли економіка Ізраїлю ще була дуже слабенька, вона виробляла товари не з найкращої якості і не дуже конкурентні по кошторису. У Бельгії, у Франції, в Англії євреї купували ізраїльські товари, незважаючи на їхню неконкурентоспроможність. Цим вони підтримували Ізраїль. Я не знаю, може пан Павло розповість мені, чи купляють українські товари, незважаючи на їх неспроможність конкурентну, в Канаді, якщо є вибір, купити краще і дешевше. Але тоді для Ізраїлю це було дуже важливо, коли тепер це вже не потрібно. Тепер вже Ізраїль має сильну економіку, і він не потребує такої фінансової допомоги і інших. Але те, що діаспора впливала дуже на Ізраїль, допомагала дуже йому, а тут діаспора була позбавлена можливості допомагати Україні в 90-ті роки. І те, що розповідав, і дуже добре знає пан Павло, про відношення з українським урядом, з українськими посольствами, це було навіть до ворожості, доходило вже в наші часи, наприклад, при Януковичу і таке інше. Про підтримку ідентичності, про яку казав пан Павло, це дуже важливо. Бо насправді в сучасному світі збереження ідентичності – це дуже важке завдання. Бо коли є права людини, коли захищається кожна особистість, не так важливо община. Так, як вона була раніше, бо вона захищала своїх членів. Тепер держава захищає, сучасна держава захищає. І як в цих умовах зберегти ідентичність, тут ми можемо поділитися дійсно досвідом, бо у нас це проблема, і в Канаді це проблема, і це було дуже добре. Пан Мельхіор не сказав, що, наприклад, не тільки отримання громадянства будь-якого єврея, і всіх залучають до поїздок в Ізраїлі, дуже сильні програми поїздок в Ізраїль єврейської молоді з усієї діаспори, є ще служба в армії. Будь-який єврей, який є в Америці, наприклад, чи в Європі, в певних країнах, може служити армії в Ізраїлі і при потребі захищати Ізраїль. В Україні я не знаю, чи є такі порядки, чи є багато бажаючих українців з Канади чи з Америки служити в українській армії. І взагалі, чи дозволить українська армія. Але це дуже сприяє єдності між державою і її діаспорою. Я бачу такий дуже суворий погляд, тому я буду закінчувати. І останнє речення. Що б я хотів запозичити в Ізраїлю, але я розумію, що це нелегко, а може навіть неможливо. Коли йдеться про захист національних інтересів, Ізраїлю байдуже все, будь-який тиск, Організація Об'єднаних Націй, Америка. 8 років адміністрація президента Барака Обами викручувала руки Ізраїлю. А Ізраїль тримався і майже не звертав уваги на цей тиск. Я б хотів, щоб Україна дожила до такого стану, до такої міцності, щоб їй було неважливо, коли йдеться про захист її національних інтересів, щоб вона могла поводити себе так гідно, як це робить Ізраїль. Дякую.
So we have about 15 minutes time for questions. Please keep them to under a minute or so, please.
Mike? No? Okay. I have a question for our Israeli speakers based on what Yosif Zісельs told about different definitions of Jewishness. And my question is, how do you think the different options of defining who Jew is, who constitutes a Jew, so to say, affects the cohesiveness of Jewish diaspora and relations between the diaspora and Israel? Meaning, when I'm in America, it seems to me that it's assumed that any Jewish person is Judaic. When you are asked in New York, are you Jewish, and then if you happen to say yes, you're allowed to participate in some religious practice. Yeah. So in Israel, in contrast, considered part of the population not strictly religious, but maybe atheists, maybe adamant about being atheists. And it seems like it's not assumed that any considered part of Jewish diaspora can be atheist in the same way as it's possible in Israel. So is what was Yosif mentioned, memory of the Holocaust and memory of persecution a significant part of that definition, which can be kind of a bridge this religious and ethnic definitions of Jewishness. And finally, you mentioned that a Jew is somebody who is born to a Jewish mother or who converted to Judaism. Again, it's biological, hereditary definition mixed with religious definition. How does it work in principle for cohesiveness? Is it good or is it bad?
You want me to answer?
Okay. You involved in your question some of the most difficult issues on the Jewish agenda today, on the Israeli agenda, governments fall and raise on these issues, and the relationship also with the world Jewry are very tenuous on these issues. So I can't really give you a justifiable explanation, but I can maybe clarify a few things just to give you some headlines. First of all, as was said before, Israel is not a religious state. However, the Israeli, what's called Israeli status quo, gives the rabbinate in Israel a total monopoly on the definition of Judaism in Israel, which means that that when it comes to the Jewish Israel, not when it comes to the Christian or the Muslim Israel, when it comes to the Jewish or the Muslim, when it comes to the Jewish Israel, there is no recognition whatsoever of any other stream of Judaism than the Orthodox stream, and also inside the Orthodox stream, it is the privilege of the chief rabbinate in Israel to define what kind of orthodoxy is accepted or not accepted. Which, for example, leads to a situation where we in Israel have no civil marriages. Now, again, that is the formal situation. In practice, there the Jewish mind works around it. So in Israel you have, in praxis, a more developed praxis of marriages not done by the state than in any other country, because everything is open for grabs. Right? So anybody can perform any kind of wedding in Israel, and there's no regulation around it, because the state in praxis accepts when two people live formally together that they have practically the same status as when you are married in all legal matters. So Reform rabbis or no rabbis or anybody who wants to make any kind of ceremony and so on does this. And more people don't, even Orthodox people, don't want to get married by the chief rabbi through the rabbinate. Although, again, a vast majority do, but more and more don't. Well, that's one issue. The second issue, when it comes, but there still is a major difference between Israeli Jewry, which by far and large defines itself through the Orthodox version of Judaism, even those who are not practicing Orthodox Jewry, and especially a North American Jewry, which by far and large does not define itself through the Orthodox version of Jewry, which creates a major friction. However, when it comes to the law of return and the automatic citizenship, again, because of the Supreme Court in Israel, Supreme Court defined that anybody who is converted to Judaism by any of the stream of the accepted streams of Judaism, if you're in an organized Jewish community, whatever kind of, you have to be religiously converted. But if you're converted religiously by an organized reform or conservative community, then you have a right to be citizens of Israel under the law of return, but that comes to your civil right to become a citizen of the State of Israel. You can't get married in Israel, right? Formally, under Israeli law. You can't get married in Israel because the chief rabbinate doesn't recognize you as a Jew. But you become a citizen in the State of Israel, you are Jewish in the State of Israel, you go to education in Israel, you serve in the army as an Israeli Jew and everything else, but you can't get married. And you can't get buried in Israel in the Jewish cemetery, in an Orthodox Jewish cemetery. But otherwise, everything else. So that's part of the comment. This is part of the tension which exists between vast parts of diaspora Jewry and the Orthodox and the coalition, which by far and large, a majority of the coalition members of the Israeli government today are Orthodox Jews. And not only the Orthodox parties, but also great parts of the Likud, the running party, a big part of their membership are Orthodox Jews, and therefore you have this growing tension. And again, a big part of the Jews, and I just wanted to relate to your question, you just threw out a question, in a very nice question, which again, billions of dollars and all conferences of Jewish organizations the last 40, 50 years have been exactly about that little question. How do you strengthen, how do you observe Jewish identity? Have been about this question. I think that it's not that difficult. Right? You just have to have a Judaism and a Zionism and a connection which is relevant to young people. If you're not relevant to young people, if you don't do something which is relevant to their lives, if they live in Ukraine or in America, or wherever they live, then they're not going to be. Today it's a free choice. They're not forced to be Jews. They're not Jews because of anti-Semitism. There's a free choice, and there's a lot out there. They're not going to be Jews. They're not going to be part of the Jewish identity if they don't think that there is something there which is relevant either religiously or culturally or in any other way, speaks to something which is meaningful in their lives. And that's why we have to create, I believe it's there, we have to create something which is meaningful for young Jewish life. And that's it, not to make conferences about it, just to do it. Thank you.
Yeah. I know is it on? It is. I agree with what Michael said, but I think to go further in your point, and very, very briefly. Look, to be a Jew every Jew is different. Every Jew sees what's important to them in Jewish history, in Jewish life, as a little bit different. Some are absolutely secular. You heard today from Dan Meridor, the founders of several of the founders of the modern state of Israel were from the secular community. But there are secular Jews who feel strongly about Jewish culture. There are religious Jews who feel strongly about religion. There are Jews who are working all their lives to promote the Yiddish language. I mean, there are so many different variations on a theme of being Jewish. Is there a common denominator? There is a technical, legal, Jewish legal common denominator, which is by birth, a Jewish mother. But beyond that, or by conversion, but beyond that, there's something different for everyone. Now, the issue of youth, and I'll just conclude on this because maybe you have this issue as well. The issue in the United States right now, Michael has put it very well, and it's you want to capture youth in order to preserve our future. And yet, many of the strictures, and here I'll speak as an American Jew, many of the strictures of the past, the constraints of the past, the discrimination of the past, and we still have discrimination, we certainly have anti-Semitism in the United States, all of that, and yet, it's much easier to be a Jew today in America than it's ever been before. You can get a job in certain sectors of industry. There was a time when Jews couldn't get jobs in the insurance industry. They couldn't get jobs in the, believe it or not, in the advertising industry. They couldn't find it. There were quotas. They couldn't get into universities. My organization in its archive has reams of letters from colleges and high schools, private schools, saying that they don't accept Jews. We have letters from hotels that say, we don't accept Jews, but down the road, there's a hotel that accepts Jews. So you were constantly reminded of who you were, even if you didn't want to, even if you didn't find all of these wonderful things about being Jewish, you're reminded by others about who you were. Now we have a situation where it's a lot easier, and you can kind of blend in. Jewish actors always change their names, you know, the long list. Today they don't change their names. There's a reason for that. Because it doesn't matter to a lot of people. At one time there were very few, I should say, there were very few Jewish members of Congress. In 1974, a man by the name of Stephen Isaacs did a book, Jews and American Politics. And in 1974, out of the United States Senate, there were 3 Jews in the Senate out of 100, one of whom was filling a vacancy. 2 had been elected. And there were only 13 members out of 435 who were Jewish. Today, we've had, over the last generation, a certain point where we've had more than 30 Jewish members out of 435, and we've had up to 13 out of 100. And why is that? It's because it's much easier. People are not looking to impose those kinds of barriers by and large. The challenge for the diaspora community is not for Israel. Israel has its own, it deals with these identity issues on its own. But the challenge in the diaspora is how to maintain that identity in the face, interestingly enough, of greater acceptance. And that is a real challenge. You know, it's a little bit easier. Not say easier. It's difficult, of course, when people tell you define who you are. But at least that's there, and certainly not making a case for that. The challenge we have again is how do you make it relevant? How do you make it interesting? How do you make it exciting? While at the same time maintaining that link to the state of Israel, which is the focus for Jews everywhere.
We have time for one more question, but ideally, if it could be to Paul Grodd and Yosif Zissels. Is there someone who has a question that is appropriate to them to answer?
Yes.
Okay, please.
Раз буде питання до Павла і до пана Зісельса, я задам українською. Андрій Майкл, Інститут лібералізму. Я розумію, що цінності ідентичність – це основа всього, але для реалізації діяльності в цьому житті необхідні певні інституції. Які, на вашу думку, необхідні, щоб з'явилися, а які треба покращити? Наприклад, Міністерство закордонних справ зараз пробує ввести Український інститут планології з французьким німецьким підходом, але це на базі міністерства. Тобто, які на ваші формальні і неформальні інституції необхідні для України? І друге невеличке запитання. У нас, крім міграції зовнішньої, у нас ще внутрішня міграція, тимчасово переселені особи, і теж треба питання інтеграції спільноти, в які вони попадають. Тобто, який досвід інших країн чи інших спільнот ми могли б застосувати в своїй країні?
Я можу почну. Just because most I think are in English, I'll answer in English. That's okay. One of the challenges I think with a post-Soviet Ukraine is, and so I'll be a little bit controversial here, is that the Soviet system, if it didn't control something, it didn't trust it, and there is that risk of the Ukrainian government setting up institutions in the diaspora because there is that tendency to want to control. And we have challenges with our diaspora in Russia, for example, where some of the Ukrainian institutions there are, quite frankly, not helpful, and they're controlling. And I think that there is this tendency and a bit of a reluctance by the Ukrainian diaspora for Ukraine to create a ministry of the diaspora, or for Ukraine to create kind of these overarching institutions, because Ukraine still is struggling with transparency and governance that we take for granted in Canada and in the Western countries. So I'm not answering your question. I'm identifying what the challenge is. Because there's no silver bullet of saying we'll create a ministry of the diaspora and everything will be great. Frankly, I think it's up to us. And as Vice President of the Ukrainian World Congress, we have our upcoming Congress happening in November. That's one of the key topics: is how do we become a stronger diaspora organization? How do we help build stronger communities in those countries ourselves? Because right now, I don't think that it's the appropriate time to wait for Ukraine to help the diaspora. We have to help ourselves, and in turn help Ukraine. Look, I think that the initiative by Minister Klimkin is great, the Ukrainian institutes, but the reality is they don't have the resources to really do them justice. And quite frankly, I think that they should be targeting how do they build Ukraine's image in the world and not worry about building diaspora, at least at this point in time in Ukraine's evolution.
Я можу додати тільки декілька слів. Я не випадково акцентував увагу на ідентичності. Бо інституції, як частина інфраструктури держави, це похідна від ідентичності, а не навпаки. Є байка у Крилова, що як друзі ви сідайте, а музикантами все одно не будете. Ось в чому проблема. Наша інфраструктура нашої держави, адміністративна, бюрократична, це залишок навіть не совєтської, а ще й імперської, російської бюрократичної системи. Частина українців, ось ті, що виходили на Майдани, що захищала гідність, їх, можливо, не так багато, 15, можливо, 20%, вони вже потребують іншої інфраструктури, інших інституцій. А держава, бюрократія тримається ще за ті. Ви не можете сьогодні взяти в окремому місті, на окремій вулиці в Києві створити інститут, який буде відповідати сучасному баченню, виконувати ті завдання, які ви на нього покладаєте. Бо він буде такий, як і все інша інфраструктура. Це дуже складне питання, але тим не менш треба намагатися щось робити в цьому напрямку.
Thank you to all the panelists. I think that it was a very lively and fascinating discussion, and I think that as it was post-prandial and no one was dawning off and fall asleep, it was a sign that it was indeed interesting. So you can restore yourselves with a cup of coffee for the next sessions, which I think are equally interesting. They deal with technology, they deal with the defense sector in Israel, both of which are of great relevance to Ukraine. Thank you, and let's have a break and reconvene in half an hour.